possibly with the daughter. Step out with this.
2412.
Veteran crisis hotline's calling in, so they have a female veteran's off her medication. She's at work to safe haven. Attacking 12, cycle check that one out.
6 Rumble, 2 Flint, try to get your shots going.
Officer still stands for talk. No. Offender in custody. Anyone else close by this result, let me know.
Good afternoon, everybody. Had to throw that up there. You know, got to cover all bases. You know what I mean? So we had to throw that up there. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be. It's like mid afternoon for you, right? Midday? No, it's not midday. It's
Me?
late
7 p.m.
7
7.
p.m. The evening. The evening. So we were gonna do a read through, but I went ahead and got the audio version as well, and I think it'd be kind of cool to sit back and listen to the audio and commentate. I think it'll be neat. So I went ahead and got that as well. Um, but I wanted to, and y'all have a lot of good questions in chat. I've been seeing you chatting as the show started, and trust me, it's a lot of like, why hasn't the 911 call been released? Trust me, trust me. These are questions that this is, like I said, this is the case. I started off making my show world events, sports, moon landings, weird stuff, just a general topic kind of show. And because I had a different idea. And a week later, unfortunately, this crime took place a week later after I started. And when I started, come like that first week and a half, right? Of where's the press when you hear it on the news and it's like, where's the press conference? Where's the cops standing out front talking to the reporters? Like, how come 3 days go by? You're like, what the hell is going on? So you had no choice but to talk about it, because when you think about that could be your loved one and you're like, where's the justice already? Come on, man. We got to talk about this. And it turned the channel into a true crime channel. This is the case right here. So this one means something extra when it comes to what we do here, for the communities and everything. Because I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I don't know if I would have went down the path that I'm on right now if it wouldn't have came from this. So trust me, all of your questions, it's crazy to think it's almost 2 years now, just 5 months away from being 2 years. Not even 4.5.
Yeah.
And man, it's crazy to even see where like the court process is going to. It's unfortunate. So I wanted to play this video for you guys. This is a little small clip from ABC News. Just a little couple-minute video, kind of getting into him talking about the book just for a few moments. And then we're going to switch to the audio version, and you guys can chill back and listen as well. Rosee, if at any moment you want me to pause the audio, I'll go ahead and pause it. But we will be pausing it throughout, just for fair use and commentary as well. Also, I will be playing the music very slightly in the background just to give it a different audio feel. And if you would like to have the book yourself, here is the link to the copy, or a link to the book. Hopefully it'll fit. It does not. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the description. And if you want the link, all you have to do is just click on the description and go to there, and you can get your own copy. All right, so I'm going to play this video. Thank you all for hanging out. I appreciate you. And I'm excited to get into this book. I've been waiting a few days to listen to it, and I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
A year and a half after the brutal killing of 4 college students, Xana Kernodle, her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Gonzalez. Families and friends still awaiting justice as a trial has yet to be set for Brian Coburger.
I hope people understand how all these kids that were a part of this were doing everything right. And they were going to be the type of people that you wanted to be your neighbor.
On November 13th of 2022, a quadruple homicide rocked the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho, and the nation. It made headlines everywhere.
Now to the investigation into the deaths of 4 college students from the University of Idaho. There is news tonight, chilling new images.
It also took over social media with theories.
All right, this is what I think happened in the Idaho murders.
Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure you've heard of the University of Idaho murders.
As the victims' families and friends waited nearly 7 weeks for a suspect to be arrested.
The arrest of a 28-year-old man in Pennsylvania in connection with the brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Now, new reporting about the murders detailed in a new book by award-winning author Howard Blum.
You come to the conclusion that based on your research, your interviews, you believe that Brian Coburger did it.
I believe that Brian Coburger did it, but there are 2 parts to that question. The first part is, can he be convicted in a court of law? And I think that's a much higher mountain to climb.
When the Night Comes Falling, based in part on Blum's early conversations with the Moscow Police Department before the judge issued a gag order shrouding the investigation in secrecy.
I was able to reconstruct this night when everything seems to fall apart.
It all began November 12th, 2022, a Saturday night in college. Friends headed to local bars and parties. Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogen, newly 21, went to the popular campus bar, the Corner Club, around 10 p.m.
These 2 girls were just there for each other.
Steve Gonzalez is Kaylee's heartbroken father.
They went to dances together.
Yeah, just a good, wholesome friendship that you hope every child has. And you're grateful that they have that.
Investigators say the 2 young women left the Corner Club around 1:30 a.m. And by 1:40, Kaylee and Maddie were seen laughing and taking pictures as they ordered from a food truck in downtown Moscow.
I could just tell just by her body language that she was definitely feeling pretty good. And I wish I could have been there and given them a hug.
At 1:56 a.m., the pair arrived home. According to authorities, their roommate, Xana Kernodle, and her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, both 20 years old, were at a fraternity party earlier that same night, but also returned to that off-campus home by about 1:45 a.m. Hours later, all 4 were dead. The other 2 roommates were already home and allegedly sleeping. They were unharmed. Little information has been released to the public, but Blum's book now claiming to fill in some of the gaps that night.
In your reporting, you come to the conclusion that Maddie was the target in this.
The authorities, in their mind, are convinced that the suspect came in through the sliding door on the 2nd floor of the house. Right once you enter the kitchen area, there's a bedroom that Dylan Mortensen was in. On the left-hand side, the right-hand side was Xana's bedroom. If he was just on a killing spree, it would have been natural, instinctive to go to one of those doors. Instead, he goes up this narrow staircase and he turns directly into Maddie's room. And I think Maddie was his target.
Sources tell both Blum and ABC News that the 2 surviving roommates were using their phones to communicate during and after the murders.
According to testimony that was made to the grand jury, the 2 girls were communicating. They were texting one another, not just after, but at one point during the killings.
Sources close to Coburger's family telling Blum his father Michael was on edge as he picked up Brian from school that winter.
He's been reading the headlines. He knows that 4 students were killed just 12 miles from his son's house.
He knows. He knows. And he knows too. This is crazy.
Yeah, he knows that he knows.
He knows that he knows. That's a good t-shirt right there. He knows that he knows. And then on the back it can say no shit Sherlock, you know? He knows that he knows. Yes, no shit Sherlock.
He knows what a troubled son he has. The Moscow police issue a bolo, a stop order on a car that is a white Hyundai Elantra. He realizes my son drives a 2015 Hyundai Elantra.
And according to Blum sources, Brian's own sister approached their dad, voicing her suspicions about Brian.
What was that conversation like?
She's a family psychologist, and she knows her brother has had problems. She goes to Michael, and she says, Dad, in effect, we have a real problem.
In effect.
I'm starting to believe that Brian could be involved in the...
And I'm starting to believe that we're going to hear in effect a lot in this book. That's what I'm starting to believe. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Yeah.
She did. Oh my Lord. Dude, this is crazy. Mark and Betty, right? Like, especially when Nancy Grace is like, Howard Blum, I learned so much from you about Brian Coburger's daddy. It's like, oh my gosh. Nancy. Nancy. This was about the same time that I quit Nancy last year.
Yeah.
This was maybe it was a month before. It was about the same time I quit Nancy. And then we made up at the end of the year, you know, right before New Year's, you know. And it's been pretty good for the last few months, but I'm afraid to watch that last one, Rosie, because I feel like I might get back to that point where I just quit talking to Nancy.
Well, if you want to preserve your relationship with her, then maybe don't watch it.
Just walk away for a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Just walk away. We'll come back later.
These killings. And what does Michael do? He can't confront it. He just turns around and walks away.
Shortly after, police arrested Brian Coburger on December 30th, 2022. The Coburger family not commenting on the claims in Blum's book. His former public defender in Pennsylvania, Jason Labar, saying, I find it brazen that such an esteemed author would publish a book based on multiple layers of speculation, assumptions, and presumptions, while Brian Coburger, veiled in innocence, has yet to have his trial. While Blum details Kaylee's father's tireless pursuit of answers, the Gonzalez family telling ABC News they have never spoken with Mr. Blum about the contents of his book.
Remember this? We've never spoken.
Yeah.
We've never. How in the hell does he know? And you got Nancy Grace going, Howard Blum. I learned so much about Brian Coburger and his daddy. Like, come on. He's not talking to anybody. He's talking to people. Like, seriously, nobody was even talking to the fucking cops. Do you think they're gonna talk to some old man that's fucking not from there and he's walking around trying to talk to people? You think they're gonna talk to him? They ain't talking to the cops. They sure as hell ain't gonna talk to him. Where? Oh boy, this book. I don't know. This is gonna be crazy. I don't know. I have a weird feeling. I'm just gonna say this. I hope we finish the book. That's all I'm gonna say. I hope we finish the book.
And they call it fiction, a version made up by him relying on sources that have no responsibility or duty to speak the truth.
They're not even talking.
In May of last year, at his arraignment, Coburger stood silent.
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Because Mr. Coburger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge.
There's no real rhyme or reason for you to stand silent. If you truly believe yourself to be not guilty, then say it. If you want to take a plea, then say it. But standing silent doesn't stop the proceedings. It doesn't move it forward.
Investigators claim DNA evidence and surveillance footage, plus cell phone records, all link Coburger to the murders, but his attorney maintains that he had no connection to the victims. Coburger has been held at the Latah County Jail in Moscow, Idaho since early 2023, while his team builds their case, claiming he's innocent.
When will the trial take place? That's the question that the defense does not want to be answered. Their strategy seems to be delay, delay, delay. There's a wisdom that lawyers often say, if you have the facts, go into the courtroom and pound them. If you don't have the facts, pound the table. Well, Brian Coburger's defense is doing a lot of table pounding.
A hearing.
I don't know what the fuck he's watching. They've been doing a lot of table pounding. The only people I've seen standing up, throwing fits, throwing notebooks down, waving their hands, screaming, "Judge, judge, judge," and then having the contradiction thrown in their face from the other side. That's been the prosecution. I've never seen Ann Taylor act out of respect or lack of to the court. And I've seen Bill Thompson have some baby fits, so I don't know.
Yeah, there's been some table pounding, definitely. Table pounding and highlighting.
I mean, I remember one of the first few court hearings where Bill Thompson was actually sitting with the audience, allowing the other lawyers to handle part of the hearings, and he got so fed up, he actually stood up from where the witnesses were at and walked up with his notebook and started screaming at. It's like, what the hell is he talking about? I hope we finish the book. I'm serious.
Great. I don't know.
Hey, it was only it was like $24 total for the book and the audio, so it's worth it. It's worth it. So let me go ahead and we'll get this little special cover up here for you. We're going to switch to the audio now. Again, here, hold on one second. Let me get that link in the description real quick, because I thought for sure it would fit. Hold on. Let's get this in there. All right, there, we got it in the description. So if you want it, you can go ahead and click on the link in the description. And we'll get to... All right, here it is right here. Now, I skipped a few parts. I'm going to a note to the reader. So we're not going to be starting from the very beginning. 5 hours and 43 minutes. So I'm going to let it play through. We're going to commentate on it. We'll see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the narration speed. We're going to go to 1.5. Okay, just to speed it up a skosh as well. You're good. All right, here we go.
A note to the reader.
Can you guys hear it?
People talk. That insight had been passed on to me by Sidney Schonberg, the hard-charging Metro editor of the New York Times back when I was a cub reporter. I'd been trying to chase down the intricacies of a complex story spilling across the South Bronx that involved narcotics, cops, voodoo, and, at final count, 38 murders. And I had come up empty-handed. Frustrated, I was this close to giving up. Keep knocking on doors. Keep going around, Sid counseled. You'll be surprised what people will eventually tell you. People talk. So I kept at it, and after 8 months or so of me putting in my time, Sid proved right. People had slowly opened up, and I had my story. In fact, it turned out to be a 6-part series. When I set off to a wintry Idaho to report on the perplexing murders of 4 college students, I tried to keep Sid's advice front and center in my mind. But my confidence flagged after a stern judge issued a gag order that, for all valuable purposes, prohibited anyone with first-hand knowledge of the events from speaking with the press. Then another obstacle. There were some people who, in spite of the court's ruling, made it clear that they'd be willing to share what they knew, but only for a price. It was tempting, yet I ultimately decided that sort of transaction didn't sit right with me. I plowed on.
For a price. I'm going to pause it real quick. Yeah, I'll tell you for a price. You think, come on, man. That's ridiculous. That already shows you right there.
I think he's just trying to sound honorable.
I wonder if he paid people to get this shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm wondering. And that's why he went with it. Because he's like, yo, I paid for these interviews. It's got to be serious. You know, it's got to be real. Come on. I bet that's what took place.
In the course of a hectic and exhausting year, I made many trips to Idaho, Washington State, and Pennsylvania. I knocked on doors, took people to dinner, had coffee in hospitable living rooms, downed Rolling Rocks in roadhouse bars, and I worked the phone incessantly. Another boon, I had made some friends in law enforcement over my years working an investigative reporter's beat, and I called in those chips too. Then, as the case moved forward, from the arrest warrant to the grand jury indictment to the motions the defense and the prosecution filed as they prepared for trial, a small mountain of legal documents, many filled with fascinating revelations, began to pile up. These all allowed me to get behind the scenes and into the minds of many of the characters in this story. More often than not, my sources insisted that I could not reveal their names. Either the consequences of violating the gag order weighed heavy on their minds, or they feared professional retaliation from their law enforcement bosses. Also, it should be noted that individuals included in this narrative, whether as a result of the gag order or their wanting financial remuneration, or for their own personal reasons, refused to be interviewed. Nevertheless, by drawing on their public statements as well as detailed revelatory conversations I had with their friends, relatives, business associates, and in reviewing their social media postings, I was able to share what they were thinking and feeling. I could make them come alive on the page without their having agreed to an interview. I was therefore able to write this account of the Idaho student murders, a true story about people caught up in horrific events with a first-hand insight, authority, and accuracy. And with some surprising revelations. A brief chapter-by-chapter note on sources follows at the end of this book. But for now, it's simply sufficient to know that Sid had once again been right. People talk. Part 1.
Oh, my Lord.
Michael's story.
Michael? Who's
1. Suppose you wanted to kill someone. That would be easy. There are lots of ways. But suppose you wanted to kill 4 people, all in the same house, all within moments of one another, and you chose to use a knife. That could help eliminate the noise, but it would require skill, strength, and patience. Murder is hard work, especially if people fight back.
Who is Michael?
Then there's the really big hurdle.
Right?
You want to get away with it.
It already started.
You're determined
off.
to stab 4 people living in a single home in the still of the night, and then disappear without leaving a clue to your identity. Now that's a more difficult challenge. But you did it. The perfect crime. Michael Coburger woke up early to check on the weather, but instead learned about the shooting.
Okay, Michael Coburger.
It was not long after dawn on December 15th, 2022. The big Kansas sky still gray and solemn, and his night's sleep had been fitful. He felt out of sorts, a complaint he'd continually make as the days ticked down to Christmas, but he blamed his unease on all the travel. It was an explanation that made good sense. In the hectic span of little more than a week, Michael, a graying 67-year-old who had already started to feel the aches and pains of his senior years, had been shuffling through a disruptive flutter of time zones as he made his way back and forth across nearly the entire width of the country. Just 5 days earlier, he'd flown in harsh sunshine from Philadelphia to Seattle, then caught a twin-engine Embraer E-170 jet for the 1 hour or so shuttle flight into a dark, frigid Pullman, Washington, Moscow, Idaho regional airport.
Dude.
There was a long walk from the plane to the squat single-story terminal, and the evening cold hit him like a punch. It was a lonely, desolate outpost, and particularly so when gripped by the long shadows of the northwest winter. The runway had been bulldozed out of the vast dune-like hills of the Idaho Palouse, and the matchbox-sized airport was the only sign of civilization in a rutted, lunar-like landscape that spread into the distance toward a foreboding wall of amber mountains. But Brian, his 28-year-old son, had, as promised, been there to meet him, and from the airport it was just a 12-minute drive, if the roads weren't slick with frost, to Brian's apartment across the state line in Pullman, Washington. To his doting father's pride, Brian had just finished his first semester as a PhD candidate in criminal justice at Washington State University, an accomplishment that, to any objective eye, was an academic success story. Brian had been a mediocre student at a hardscrabble high school in blue-collar Pocono Valley, Pennsylvania, where Michael had been the maintenance man. Upon graduation, he stumbled, without any real interest, into a local community college. But then, as if by magic, once he started his college coursework, a long-submerged burst of ambition and focus rose up. He did well enough to transfer to nearby DeSales University, an institution firmly Jesuit and rigorous where, after earning a BA in psychology, he switched to criminal justice and received his master's. Then, with the support and encouragement of his DeSales professors, he was accepted into Washington State University's nationally acclaimed doctoral program. It was the same prestigious university where Michael's sister-in-law, his older brother Clement's wife, had impressed the family by getting a degree in psychology. For Michael, who had never gone to college, this was an astonishment. He had grown up in the rough-and-tumble city streets on the industrial periphery of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where his father had also been a maintenance man. The fact that his son was well on his way to a doctorate, Dr. Brian Christopher Coburger was how he was already referring to him in a conversation with a mechanic at a local garage just days before he flew to Seattle, was a cause for immense pride. Things he could only have dreamed of would be accomplished by his son. And it was a future that seemed even more remarkable when Michael allowed himself to look back at the painful tumult of Brian's teenage years. Complicated. That was the tactful euphemism that Marianne, his wife for nearly 4 decades, would finally settle on when talking about their son. But Marianne was, Michael knew, always more gentle, always more outwardly caring to their 2 older daughters and young Brian than he was. And after all, patience was part of her job. She was a diligent paraprofessional working with special needs pupils in the Pennsylvania school district where he was the janitor. Yet for Michael, he'd frankly acknowledged to relatives all he had gone through with the boy had thrown him for a loop. It was not just that he had been unprepared to raise such a troubled child, but the cascade of problems were of a sort that was more than he could fathom. He rejoiced that it was all in the past. Or was it? For when pressed, an exasperated Michael would share with his 2 grown daughters, one a psychologist, the other an aspiring was very much the operative adjective, actress, that there's really no telling what Brian might do next. And that was arguably why he had decided to make the tedious and exhausting trip out to Pullman, Washington, and then, not much more than 24 hours later, turn around as if on a dime to make the even more monotonous and draining car ride back across the country with Brian as his son returned to the family home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, for the month-long winter break. He wanted to show Brian that he cared. He wanted to make up for all the hostility that had erupted from both their corners during the trying years. And, not least, he wanted to see what was up with his son. The past 5 months had been the longest period that Brian, in all his 28 years, had been away from home, and his father wanted to gauge how the boy had handled things. He wanted to explore close up which version of himself Brian, who had shown himself to be a master of disguise, was now presenting to the world. 4 long days trapped shoulder to shoulder in the nearly claustrophobic confines of a Hyundai Elantra as they made the 2,500-mile journey promised the sort of proximity that could be filled with revelations. Yet right from the start, Michael felt that something was up. They had started to argue, and the sheer scale and intensity of his son's objections threw Michael for a loop. He felt ambushed by the force of Brian's anger. The issue under heated debate was the route home. In the weeks before heading off from Pennsylvania, Michael had done his homework. Sitting at the computer console that was perched as usual on the kitchen table, he did a series of Google searches. The quickest, most logical drive, he discovered, was pretty much a straight line. They should plow east across the country along I-90. He had shared this itinerary with his son in a phone call around Thanksgiving, and Brian had breezily agreed with the reasoning. Only now that they were about to drive off from his son's Spartan single-room apartment in Pullman, Washington, Brian had kicked that plan to the wayside. Instead, he insisted that they button-hook south through Colorado, where they'd then pick up I-70. It was an itinerary that made little sense to Michael. For one thing, Colorado in mid-December was snow country. There was no telling when a storm might suddenly come blowing down from the Rockies. And if weather came in, it'd be rough going in Brian's 7-year-old Hyundai Elantra. Without 4-wheel drive, you'd be slipping and sliding all over the road. And for another, it was a longer route. Even if they got lucky and didn't cross paths with a snowstorm, it'd still add days to their journey. But the more Michael tried to explain, the more Brian dug in. It was a volatile dialectic that Michael had suffered through too many times in the past. So he surrendered. "You're the boss," he later told people he'd said, deciding to diffuse things. Because, as he'd later share with the family and they'd pass on to friends, he had started seeing the sort of warning signs he knew only too well. Brian, the unflinching authority. Brian, the deep thinker who always knew better. When the boy got into his hard-headed know-it-all mood, Michael's go-to response was to back off, to go with the flow. And after all, confrontations had never sat well with him. But that didn't mean Michael had given up worrying about the weather. Sure, they had made it through Colorado without encountering any snowfall, But an early winter storm swooping across the Great Plains would be no less of a catastrophe. So now that he was fully awake, he asked Brian if he had checked his phone for the latest forecast. Without a word, according to the account his family shared with relatives, Brian handed him the device. Michael read, WSU Alert Pullman. SWAT team is actively working on the south side of campus. Shelter in place until further notice. And all at once, everything that had been nagging at him since his reunion with his son, all the emotions that he had not dared to name, rose to the surface in a sudden fear. The details, as he would harvest them that morning from the radio news and the internet, were sparse. But in time, Michael would get a fuller picture, and it served to exacerbate his concerns. At around 8 o'clock the previous evening at the off-campus coffeehouse apartments, an ugly 3-story complex offering utilitarian student housing that was only a stone's throw from the similarly stark development where Brian lived and Michael had just camped out for an uncomfortable night, a rifle-toting resident had threatened to kill his 2 roommates. The Whitman County Regional SWAT team came in heavy. An 18-ton armored mine-resistant ambush-protected, or MRAP in military parlance, vehicle had lumbered down the snow-dusted Latah Street in a starry night and positioned itself directly opposite the building where the 2 students were held hostage. Painted in big black letters on the tank-like vehicle's khaki-colored hood were the initials JRD. This was a tribute to Deputy Justin DeRozier, a former member of the team. At the same time, it also was a cautionary reminder. DeRozier had been shot dead while checking out nothing more ominous than a poorly parked motorhome. The moral? You never know what's waiting for you out there. 222! The command from the team's tactical leader screeched over the walkie-talkie, and immediately about a dozen heavily armed cops began blocking off the perimeter, keeping returning students and passers-by well clear of the complex. At the same time, officers began hurriedly escorting bewildered students out of the building into the wintry night. A makeshift shelter had been hastily set up in Beasley Coliseum, a university athletic arena. By now, a negotiator had gotten through to the apartment on a phone line. The gunman identified himself as Brent Kopacka, and he was talking a mile a minute, and not much that he said made any sense. All the negotiator could make out was panic, rage, and chaos. The cursory bio the sheriff's office had pulled together on Kopacka pushed the threat level up another notch. He was a 36-year-old former U.S. Army paratrooper who had served in Afghanistan. He returned with a Purple Heart, a traumatic brain injury, and a tormenting case of PTSD he'd been trying to shake off for the past 16 years. The last time the local cops had encountered Kopacka, he had been belligerently arguing with a voice rising up from under a manhole cover. The resigned mood among the frontline SWAT officers held that things could very quickly go from bad to worse, and the team had better move in while there was still hope of getting the hostages out alive. But as the SWAT leader was poised to issue the go order, the 2 hostages walked out of the building. Kopacka had told them to get the hell out before he changed his mind. And just like that, the team exhaled. The cops fell back, taking cover behind the bulk of the MRAP or crouching low in the heavy shadows cast by the wall of interconnected apartment buildings. They'd wait and let the negotiator talk the guy down. Then the shooting started. From the second-floor window, Kopacka began firing a long-barreled weapon toward the MRAP. When a bullet found its mark, the ping off the armor plating echoed sharply through the taut night. And Kopacka was ranting. Angry, largely incoherent messages boomed out. Things had gone beyond reason. The order came to open fire, and now the tree-lined college town streets crackled with the echoes of battle. The firefight went on with sporadic intensity for a while, but before dawn, a decision was made. 7 hours was enough. Things had to be resolved before students headed to class. Take him out, the SWAT commander ordered at about 4 a.m. Had there been any thought about firing tear gas through the apartment's window? A volley of stun grenades, or simply playing things long, letting the decorated Army veteran continue firing until he ran out of either ammunition or rage? The answers to those questions remain hidden in the Palouse Area Law Enforcement Critical Investigation Response Team report that was finally filed 6 months later and immediately stamped confidential. All that is a public certainty is that in the instant after a 2-handled metal battering ram smashed open the plywood apartment door, a SWAT team sergeant stormed in and shot the rifle-toting Brent Kopacka dead. That was, at least in its broad, unsettling strokes, the story that Michael had pieced together from news reports as he drove across Kansas in the brisk morning with his son. And it made his blood run cold. What was wrong with people out there in the Northwest? He had wondered angrily, according to a conversation family members had subsequently shared with friends. Another violent death, the 5th, in a Palouse college town. Less than a month earlier, in November, 4 University of Idaho college students had been found dead, hacked to death in their off-campus house.
Jeez.
No one understood why or who was responsible.
What the hell?
This was a broken place, Michael decided.
Why would you
Maybe
use
it had
that
something to do
word?
with the mountains, the higher altitudes, he speculated, according to the family conversations that were passed on.
Why would you use
Or
that
maybe it was
word?
just the West. When his parents separated, his 4 brothers and his mother had headed out from Brooklyn to Las Vegas. But Michael had stayed behind with his father, and even when he visited them, he had found the desert beyond the city lights a haunted place. Spooky was how he had always described it. and the Northwest, he had grown convinced, was no better. Demons seemed to be haunting the adjacent college towns of Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho. Michael worried for his son and couldn't wait to get him home, away from all this. Delays were a constant anxiety. As they drove east through Kansas toward Indiana, he was on the lookout for the first slow flakes of falling snow. Perhaps that was why he never noticed the small single-engine fixed-wing Cessna 182 that was constantly above them, shadowing their journey home like a watchful hawk, waiting for the moment when it would swoop down to strike. 2.
I don't know why he used that word. I mean, there's a whole bunch of fluffy words in there to make it pizzazz, which really, if you cut all that out, you really probably, it's only like 3 hours instead of 5.
Yeah.
But man, that choice of word for, man, he could,
Yeah.
that's a crazy, I don't know.
I don't even know what to say. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fantasy fiction. So he goes into the Kopaka stuff to explain why his dad was feeling uneasy, but here's the thing, like, so he's he's basically saying when Coburger's sister came up to him and said, "Dad, I wonder if Brian had something to do with it," and he just walked off. Like, is this supposed to be like some confirmation? Don't you think that if he, okay, don't you think if he knew or felt that way, don't you think that there would be more, what's the word? Responsibility when it came to, like, don't you think that there would be some kind of like obstruction type?
That's a good
Where-
point. I mean, yeah.
Like if what Howard Bloom is stating is true about how Michael felt, and he was really like, you know, because once she came up to him, you know, that pretty much in his mind was like, my son is the one who did this. Wouldn't there be some kind of, like, they wouldn't have just, you know, obviously they interviewed him when they all went in the house and arrested Brian and stuff.
Yeah.
Don't you think that there would have been like something that, you know, there'd have been something instead of just letting the parents go and we're focused on Brian?
I guess it would depend on what they were basing it on. Like, maybe if they were saying they just had a feeling, then that wouldn't be enough. But I mean, they should have, if this is true, they should have said something. I mean, this is actually like putting them in a different light. It's not actually fair.
No, it's not. It's what it is
Implicating.
it's reckless.
Yeah.
It's very reckless for you to sit there and say that you have sources, firsthand knowledge, and you know all of these things, because what if Michael is sitting at home fucking depressed as shit because he was like, I know he didn't do it, and they're painting him out to be the person that did it. I know he didn't do it. Maybe the whole time he knows he didn't do it, and he's in some kind of mental depression or something, and now this book comes out, and now he has to hear people sit there and say, well, if you thought he was the one that didn't, why didn't you do anything? You know, like all of this extra shit that's going to come from it. This is reckless as hell.
That's a really good point, CJ. Yeah. He's kind of just throwing him into the whole thing.
He's almost making him a co-conspirator. He's already getting vibes, you know, like before the crimes even took place, he was feeling weird about Brian. You know, the trip where they were planning. Brian, they had a little battle about the trip and all this other, like, then he gets there and then finds out like the crime that took place, and then he comes out there and a month later, and then as they're driving back, the Kopaka situation happens. He's like, what's going on? What's wrong with the people out there? You know, he's got all this stuff he's gonna, like, you heard Howard Bloom and this stuff we were watching in the last show where he was sitting there talking about the whole ride back and what they were talking about and how Michael feeling and this and that. It's like, man, Mark and Betty, if and they shouldn't have to do this. That's the sad thing about it. They shouldn't have to, but you know what? I would. I would. If I was the family and this is not true, I would put out a statement to fucking night. Like, that's when I would put out a statement. To fucking night. That's a new fucking word right there. Like now. Like now I would be putting out a statement, because this right here, this is gonna make the rounds. He's already making the rounds, you know, talking about Michael. But man, this is some in-depth. We're just in part 1 and there's like 28 or something. Imagine how descriptive it's going to be.
And I mean, what is he basing like Brian Coburger's history and childhood on? Like that he was a troubled. I know that people have said that he was troubled, but like the way he's putting it from Michael's point of view is also kind of weird, because I feel like if he were that troubled, if he were like really that much of a troublemaker, his DNA would have been in the system from the beginning. Like, it would have. Yeah.
That's a good point too.
Yeah.
That's a good point. All right. This is part 2. If you want the book, the link is in the description. Great points, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with us today.
Yet this was not Michael's first cross-country road trip with his son. At the tail end of July, barely 5 months earlier, he had been riding shotgun in the passenger seat of the same white Hyundai as they made their determined way west from the Poconos to the Pullman, Washington campus. Back then, the air conditioning in the tight little car had been cranked up high, and the worry had been that the darkening summer skies would erupt in fearsome thunderstorms. Driving in the wake of mammoth 18-wheelers sluicing down the highway would be a risky business. And that time, too, Michael had found little that was pleasant in the prospect of such a disruptive whirlwind journey. The plan was that he'd be flying out of Seattle and heading back to Philly only days after he arrived. Nevertheless, last summer, he had decided it was a necessity to make the arduous trip alongside his son. To an outsider, such attention might seem overly vigilant, even controlling. After all, Brian was closing in on 30, a fully grown man by any standard. He would be a teaching assistant at WSU. He'd be lecturing and grading papers, a doctoral candidate, not some immature undergrad. However, Michael, according to several knowledgeable accounts, was resolute. He would not be deterred from traveling with Brian. And he had a head full of long-nurtured reasons for such careful paternal attention. Duty, the always beating heart of a father's love, fueled one strand of his thinking. His wife, who had a gentle maternal soul, might as well have been speaking for both of them when she posted on Reddit on the eve of Brian's departure. "My son will be in Pullman in the eastern part of the state, quite close to the Idaho border," she announced with mawkish concern. "He knows absolutely no one, and we have no family there. I worry about him being lonely." Michael, who knew a few things about loneliness, his mother, when he was still a teenager, had hightailed it to Las Vegas, leaving him behind in Brooklyn to be raised by a father who had little time for child rearing, didn't want Brian to despair as he set out to get acclimated to life on his own in an unfamiliar corner of the country. A father's familiar presence, he believed, would help make the transition a bit easier. Last thing he wanted, given Brian's often unsettled moods, was for his son to feel the pressure of standing at one of life's crossroads all by himself. And in equal measure, it might be argued, guilt had been a motivator too. Michael wanted to make up for all he had put his son through. After all, it was one sort of handicap to raise 3 children on a janitor's salary. A janitor whose finances were such a catastrophe that he had to file for bankruptcy only a year after his son had been born. And it was still another sort of free-falling descent into abject poverty when, just as Brian turned 16, a besieged Michael felt he had no choice but to take refuge for a second time under the federal bankruptcy statutes. This go-round, when he emptied his pockets, all he could find for the court was $15 in cash and $49.77 in a savings account. It was not a nest egg that could bankroll the boy's college education, or for that matter, even purchase a pair of Air Jordans for his birthday. Trying to get by with only pennies in the bank was the sort of familial drama that Michael couldn't help but feel with regret might have laid the toxic groundwork for his son's turbulent adolescence. And Brian sure had a rough go of things. That weighed heavy on Michael. Yet while Marianne would try to console rather than judge their son, relatives would say, Michael's reaction was more harsh. Exasperated, he'd lecture Brian that the boy was his own worst enemy. Brian, he'd admonish, you need to get your act together. He'd rail that the boy's problems were all of his own making. Nevertheless, there was one thing for which Michael knew he alone was to blame. And even after all the years that had passed, he couldn't shake off his guilt. He had turned Brian into the cops. It was an act of desperation, and yet that didn't diminish its sting for both the father and the son. Michael's father had a record for stealing a car on a trip to Miami, and now Michael had made sure his son would be branded with a similar scar. Grandson like grandfather. But at the time, Michael had just not seen any other way. His 19-year-old boy was out of control. The arrest, he'd wanted to believe, would be a wake-up call. It would be for Brian's own good. Brian saw things differently, but then again, it was not his time for understanding. Nothing made sense, and nothing was all that he could feel. He had forged a kinship with despair, and it mattered little to him that his behavior, combative one day, detached the next, took a toll on his family. Something beyond his control was playing with his head. Mind fizzle, he called it. Looking for a remedy or even just a diagnosis, as Brian turned 15, he found solace in an online community composed of people who believed they were suffering from visual snow. This was a rare but painfully real chronic neurological condition that played havoc with one's visual perception of things. To the afflicted, the world was viewed through a glass darkly. It was like looking at a television screen, and the picture was always fluttering, the images obscured by amorphous grayish waves and scattered flickering dots. But was it a disease? Or was it a psychological condition? Doctors, according to the sparse literature, threw up their hands in frustrated confusion. They just didn't know. And what can't be diagnosed was even more difficult to treat. But there was no disputing that it sure took its toll on teenage Brian. If his online posts were a reliable guide, visual snow had buried him under an avalanche of unhappiness. Day after downhearted day, he went on the web to shout out his calls from the wild. I feel like an organic sack of meat with no self-worth. I am starting to view everyone as this. Everything I have ever done makes no sense. How did things get this way? I always feel as if I am not there, completely depersonalized. Constant thoughts of suicide, crazy thoughts, delusions of grandeur, poor self-image. It is like I have severe brain damage. I am stuck in the depths of my mind where I have to constantly battle my demons. In this high-voltage state, Brian couldn't decide whether his family was to blame for the maelstrom that was pulling him under, or if they were offering a life raft that could float him off to a safe place. In the end, though, he judged that he had sunk too deep to be saved. As my family hugs and celebrates, I am stuck in this void of nothing, feeling completely no emotion, feeling nothing. I feel dirty, like there is dirt inside of my head. But there was still room in this void for regret. I think about my father, what a good man he is, how I treat him like dirt because I have this condition and I can't take it.
What the
Everything in
hell?
his life added up to less than zero, and Brian was resigned to this grim mathematics. It was even, he apparently decided, liberating.
He knows Brian
He could
now
do
too?
whatever I want with little remorse.
He knows
He was
everything.
beyond rules, beyond laws.
He knows Brian now too.
Everyone.
I don't know how to explain this. I got this weird feeling inside my soul right now. And I feel disgusted already.
Yeah, me too.
Because, like, it's one thing to go from Michael and who you talk to and this, and now he's like, the trial hasn't even started yet. and you're writing this shit? Like, the trial hasn't even started yet. He hasn't been convicted. He hasn't been exonerated. Nothing. Hadn't even started trial. We're still a year away. We're still a year away from trial. Why did this book have to, like, you watch the court hearings and you hear the stories that we've heard the last couple days about this book. You know, he's been everywhere on YouTube, national news. He's been everywhere. It's not like there was a rush for I mean, especially after these court hearings, you can't sit here and go, like the stuff that's being said right now. We're still looking, the defense is still waiting for the cast data. The defense is still waiting for the footage. The defense is still waiting for all this stuff. What was the rush on this book?
It's weird, right?
Yeah, because the trial wasn't starting. I mean, it's not over. You see everything going on in the court hearings, and you're already talking about how they were feeling before, and how Brian is feeling. How ugly is this going to get? Is this going to get to the mom? And then is this going to get to what the victims were like what they were thinking and feeling, and like how far is this going to go? What is the rush on this book? And now he's talking about doing a movie or a TV series or something. I saw somebody in chat say that.
So that, yeah, I don't know.
I was sitting here before we even got into it. I'm sitting here going, man, is this going to be some outlandish shit? And I'm just like, oh, this is going to be crazy to listen to. It's, you know, it was already laughable what the hell he was coming up with. In my opinion, you know, there could be difference of opinion, and everybody's entitled respectfully. But now I'm sitting here listening to it, and I'm just like, man, at first I was like, I hope we can finish it, because I'm sitting here thinking about all the outlandish stuff we're going to hear. But I'm not even asking that anymore. Now I'm asking, are we going to finish it, because of what the hell this is going to, like, this is messed up. Man,
Yeah.
if I'm Coburger and I'm set free, I'm coming after this dude
I know. I mean, and it's not
with a
even
vengeance.
sorry, it's not
No.
even just what's in here. It's like even just the tone of it, like speaking about family members and their relationships, careers, education. Like it's
There-
really condescending. Like
This is I don't know. I'll keep we're only in part 2, but my gosh.
That's all you can say.
It's disgusting is what it is. I feel like it's like very reckless. Like that's why I don't even know if I even want to, cuz I mean, as much as everybody should hear or read it, I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know. This is I've never had this happen on a show before, where I'm conflicted on. This is wild. Like, it's a different kind of wild than I thought was
Yeah.
going to be the wild. This is not a comedy show wild. This is a wild where somebody could literally come across and think that this is the fucking shit that was going on when it's not even. We don't even. We're watching these court hearings and it's like, if this was about Chad Dorman or something, that's pretty damn obvious, you know? The dude admitted it, even though they have to toss certain things out. We heard the stuff in the body cam. We heard we know, right? That's one thing. This right here,
Yeah, it's lower than I was expecting. I have to
this
be honest
is
as well.
this is this is this is reckless.
Mm-hmm.
It is, yeah, right? It's distasteful.
Yeah.
It's the trial's not even started. Somebody typed in chat, the jury hasn't even been picked. Yeah, they just decided on a trial date yesterday.
But it is a good question. I'm also wondering now, like, what is the rush with this?
Yeah, what was the rush? You know, I don't even know. Like with the other Idaho 4 show stuff that I was going to do, we were going to get more into this stuff, some of the other appearances and stuff. I don't even know if I want to even. I think I'm just going to be done with, period. Like with this dude. I mean, when I read the, the, what was it? The news articles from a year and some ago,
Yeah.
what were they called? The Mind or the Hunt, the Mind of a Killer, the Hunt, something like
So,
that. It was like a different part article series. That was crazy, but that was at a different time. That was when there was a lot of things that were really questionable, you know? A lot of things were really questionable. Now that all this time has gone by, and now that we've kind of seen, firsthand with all of these different court hearings of what doesn't make sense even more, because what didn't make sense before makes sense why the other stuff doesn't make sense.
yeah.
So this is a different time, and dude, I understand that he put a lot of work into it, put a lot of time into it. I get it. But dude, I've done put a lot of time and effort into shit and I've scrapped it.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know. I'm really conflicted. Like, why the Idaho Slut book? What is this movie? I mean, it makes me wonder if he's being paid by the
Mm-hmm.
prosecution or the university or somebody. You know what I mean? It makes me wonder because the public opinion in the beginning was swaying towards his guilt, and now with all this stuff that has taken place over this time, the public swaying has kind of reeled back in. And this almost seems like, I mean, you got the prosecution scrambling, throwing fits, arguing stuff in court that doesn't even make sense. They're grasping at straws, and it makes me wonder if this dude. I wonder, because President Green writes a lot of books, sleuthers out there, do me a favor. I wonder who in this book, whatever the publishing, the the whoever editor, whatever part of this book being made, look at the people leaving reviews on this book, high name people. I'm wondering I bet you there's a connection between President Green's little book operation and this book right here. There's gotta be. There's gotta be. This has gotta be some kind of narration or not narrative push. It's got to be some kind of narrative push to get the public opinion back on the side of being guilty.
I mean, that's also like at a risk to Blum and his reputation. It's like the next scapegoat, you know.
He don't care. It's his last payday.
Yeah.
He's out after this. I bet he's got to be out after this. There's got to be. I'm telling you right now. I don't know. I haven't looked into the background, but I feel like there's got to be some kind of connection between President Green's book operation thing he's got going on with this book right here. There's got to be some kind of transfer of money going to this dude to get this book pushed out right now. Nothing else makes sense. Why are you pushing this book out? I get that you did all this work, but you would continue to write the book. You wouldn't put it out. You would continue to write it because it's an ongoing story. It's not done. Why would you need to put this book out with all these narratives? It's because somebody gave you some frickin' money to put it out. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's paying money for this positive promotion of this book, so he looks like so he gets Nancy Grace to go, oh my gosh, I didn't know so much about Coburger's daddy. Something's up.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Something's up. I'm gonna listen. I don't even know if I want to, but I'm gonna listen to. There's 8 minutes left to part 2.
Okay.
Do me a favor, you guys in chat. Oh my gosh. I don't know. Let's just. We'll
see how it goes. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I hate to waste people's time. You know what I mean? And I hate to waste all of everybody's anticipation and time and all these different things when it comes to this, but I'm really conflicted. I even feel like just fucking ending the show.
Don't worry. It's an integrity thing. We understand if that's what feels right. You have posted the link to the book, so
it's hey, listen, it's like $13 or something for the text, and it's like another 12 for the audio.
No, you can just 8 minutes. We'll understand either way.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm not gonna take this down. I'm gonna leave it up because I think it's important. I really do. I think it's important. I'm just gonna put a cross out on the full read. so people get it. It said full read, but really it's crossed out now. So maybe people will understand. Oh, you know what? We were gonna do the full read, but there's a reason why we didn't, and they can understand why with us talking about it. I don't know. I don't even feel like, and I'm the one that spent the money on it. I don't even feel like I don't know. I get that is his own opinion. You know, it's a fantasy fiction, right, detective? It's a fantasy fiction, but at the same time, I don't. I see what the hell's going on. You know,
Yeah.
we cover it, and I've been covering it since before. You know, since the day it happened, and the days following. Even if I wasn't talking about it, I was still looking up the articles, reading about it. You know, learning to become what I'm doing, and so I don't know. I just don't feel. I'm not gonna ask for a refund. I spent the money. It's but I yeah. I just
Well, I mean, you spent the money and you've read enough to know, so you do know something from spending money. Because I think
I'll
right.
yeah, like I can read it or listen to it in my own time, or I can do it like maybe where it's a members only or something where
Yeah.
it's not like out in the general public. You know what I mean? People that are members understand already, what we're about, and when it comes to the stuff that we've covered on here, um, and can get caught up pretty quick with the videos that we put out. I just I would hate for somebody that it's not even subscribed, is not even a member, to just come across this and hear the shit that's being said and being like, holy crap, this guy's guilty as shit. I don't think it's fair.
It's not.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair. So let me because this is I don't know, this has never happened before, so it's a little bit of a curveball. Do me a favor. I'm gonna go ahead and end this. And like I said, I'll still leave it up. The link is in the description for the book if you'd like a copy. And I'll figure out what I'm gonna be doing. I know I'm gonna be hitting the road tonight, so I'm gonna kind of regather my thoughts and see what's going on. I might be throwing up a notification here shortly. It is 1:00 already. I might throw up a notification here shortly. I'm going to talk with the team, see what's up. If not, I will be doing an on the road show. If you don't see me here in a little bit, I'll be doing an on the road show, starting out probably in the early morning. So grab your coffee and come hang out in the morning. We'll be hitting the road, heading back to go on location for Micah Miller, and also do some more exploring of different spots of interest as well when we get back there. So I want to say thank you all for coming to hang out. I apologize. Rosee, thank you, and I apologize to you.
No problem.
I even made this cool little screen cover for us today, and unfortunately, flush. But yeah, I apologize, you guys. Really, it's I'm sure there's other people out there doing the same. So if you don't want to get it, or you're not able to, I don't know. I don't even know how much I would want to now knowing. I don't know if I would have even spent money on it now that but it is what it is. Thank you all. Appreciate you. I'll let you guys know soon. Just check back in a half hour, an hour or something if you don't get a noti, just to see. If I don't see you guys in a little bit, I'll see you guys later this evening, early morning, and I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Oh man, I feel bad.
Don't. It's fine.
your victim at the hospital?